So here's my template, and I will use the template to create a new repo. And this repo will be the to-do list. I will call it to-do app. Now, once I have my template, once I have my project based on my template, I can open code space in it. And remember, what I will get is a new project that has my template as a base, and my template is based on Next.js, so I already have all the goodies of Next.js and all the goodies from ESLint and all the good stuff, right? Cool. So first step, npm install.
We don't have to declare the same state on the child element, right? Only the props. The state will be the props.
Mm-hmm. That's the way the data will flow into that component via the props.
I mean, o sea, tengo duda en cómo yo recibo esos parámetros desde el elemento.
Oh, okay. Let's build.
Los uso en el
Got it. Let's build that component first. I think it will be easier to see. So, okay, so we have this. So we have this to-do list application. Of course, we need to build all the components in the to-do list application: to-do list, task input, task list item, and this is the state that we're going to create, right? So we can straight up go to the components folder and create a new to-do list.gsx. Export function to-do list. Now we know our to-do list will have internally the task input component. We haven't created this component yet, but I am going to assume that I already have it, and the to-do list. Well, actually, the task list. Okay. Now the state, we already have them, is to-dos, set to-dos. Use state. Remember, you have to import use state from React. This will be an empty array. And the second will be task, set task. The second will be an empty string. Okay. Now I will start the extensions that I need, especially the prettier extension. Great. Okay. I'm just installing the extension, so every time I save my components, the code gets reformatted automatically for me, right? Now, I need to write these two components, the task input and the task list. Got it? So let's do it. New component, task input. I will return null for now. And the other component is task list. And I will also return null for now. Now, once I have created these two, I need to import them, of course, because otherwise my component will. So task input and task list. Okay? So this is like the shell of my app. Now I have the to-do list with the state and task input and task list. Of course, task list and task input are not doing anything, but what I want you to show is how the data flows into those components. And the only way they can flow is via what? There is two ways components can get data. So far, we will learn more ways later, but right now we have only two.
Via props.
Via properties and
The one I don't remember.
state,
Ah, state.
or using the state.
Is it the same?
They are not the same because one is internal to the component and the other is passed via properties. Components cannot change their properties.
Okay.
Components can change the state, right? Because the state is internal to the component, but they cannot change the properties. So we know that task input and task list get properties. So we can go to the code and say, well, the task input will get two properties. We'll get the task and we'll get an onChange from the task. Let's call it onTaskChange. So
Sorry.
task.
Let me get that.
Okay, let's go back. What was the question?
Repeat that.
Okay, so to-do list have the data. So to-do list have a state for the array of to-dos, and it has a string for the task. The task is the input, so whatever we put in the input. Okay, remember that the app has a list of tasks and also has an input, and we need to store this data somewhere. The data that this input will have. So what we're doing is to creating two states. One is for the to-dos and one is for the task. Okay, and we have this at this level in the to-do list. Now the task input component and the task list, let's think about the task list for a second. I think this will be clear. So this task list has to render a list of to-dos. And where is this list of to-dos coming from? From the state. But I need to pass it down as properties. So to-dos, to-dos. So now my task list is getting a property with the list of to-dos that needs to be rendered.
This is recording, right?
Yes, this is recorded. And because I'm passing a property, that means that my task list have to get that property. Now, we usually use props, right, as the parameter, and then we use props.todos. But I was talking about just Monday about a way to make it even a little bit more clear that we're going to pass a property called todos. So we destructure the property. So this is the equivalent of passing here props and then using props.todos. We can just say, okay, I'm going to pass a todos. I'm destructuring that todos, and then internally in my component I can use directly todos. So it's a lot clearer, because if my component has like 100 lines and it spans multiple lines of code, I can always go to the top line, the one that is creating the function, and see there what are all the properties that my component is expecting. In this case, it's only to-dos. Make sense? Right. So now what I need to do is to render that list of to-dos, right? So the job of my to-do list, my task list, is to render that list of to-dos. Now, to render that list of to-dos, let's say I'm using a div, or maybe not a div. Actually, I don't need a div. And what I would do is to do a to-dos dot map, because I know it's an array. So this is every to-do. And I will render what component?
The task list item.
Task list item. And And what is the to-do that I'm going to pass?
The same.
To-do. Now, because this is the top component on a map, what is the other property that I need to pass? When we're mapping, we need to pass a different property. Remember the property?
Yeah, the key.
The key. We could use to do the index and use the index as the key, or we can use the actual to do as the key, because, well,
Has to be unique, right?
as long as every to do is unique, hopefully it will work as a key. Of course, task list item doesn't exist, so we need to create it. New file. Yes. Now, what is the parameter or the property that I will pass to this last task list item?
The same one, to do.
To do's or to do?
Yeah, to do.
To do.
It's only one.
Because it's only one. And then here I'm rendering that to do. For now, it's just that to will be my component, nothing else. Of course, I need to import this component. And I have my component. Okay, so notice that I have a task list, and the task list got a list of to-dos, and I am mapping all the task list items, and I'm passing the to-do to every list item, so that means that every list item will have a to-do, and that's what we will render. Yes?
Can you show it side by side with the to-do list?
Both of them? I think we can
You
do
can split the.
like this? Yeah.
That's what you,
Let me ask. I see we are using the that map function,
Huh?
but is it the same if we use a for off statement, like for each element on that to do array, then we render a new.
What do you mean render?
Like then on the instructions inside that for off, we render.
What is
that.
rendering? What is the
Yeah,
rendering?
We show a task list item.
But you see that this is returning something, right? So unless you are putting that into an array and then returning the array, and that will be too much work. So what you're saying is that instead of doing to-do maps, to-do's map, so this array the map, we can do a for to-do of to-dos,
Yeah.
right? And for each one, we will have to create an array of items, and then do items dot push what? This to-do list item, right?
And why do we need that array?
Because you need to return an array, that array at the end. So this will be the equivalent. Do you think this is better than the other? We need to return, remember, React components, what can React components return to be a React component? Null, GSX, null, or an array of GSX or null. That's the only thing that we can return. We cannot return anything else. We need to return an array of GSX. That's what we were doing with the to-dos map. This to-dos map is converting my list of to-do, that is in a list of strings, to a list of GSX with the component with the task list item. Make sense? That's why we're doing the map. Cool. So at this point I have a to-do list, and let's see it in running. Let's run this. Terminal. Okay, npm run dev. Well, of course, our to-do list will be empty because there's nothing in. Well, we are not even using it. So let's go to the home component. Let's go to the page and change it in the page. Yeah, here. So to do list. Okay, so now it's there. It's just that it's not visible, of course, because we are not. We don't have anything on the to-do list. But if we open the inspector, we should see it in the inspector, right? We should see the to-do list. Oops. We should see the to-do list, and inside the to-do list, you see that we have the state for the array that is empty, and the state for the task that is empty as well. And we see the task input, and we see the task list. And you see the task list has a one property called to-dos, and it's an empty array because that's what the state has in this moment. Because it's empty, we don't have any task list item inside. But let's make it in a way that we have an initial task here. Buy groceries. And let's add another one. Walk dog. So now you see that we have two items there, and you see that the task list has two items. The task list item, buy groceries, and the task list items, walk dog. See, to do. So as you can see, the data flows from the to-do list to the task list input to the task list item, right? So from this to-do list to the task list to the task list item. Okay? Okay, now you can do the rest. Now you need to build the rest. You need to build the task input. You need to finish the task list, because remember we need to do on delete here. That's up to you. And stop. So we had the list. We had the list started, right? We have some data on the list, and the task list will render that data using the task list item. Before I move on to the task input, any questions with the task list? Questions? You understand the passing of properties, right? We're passing to-dos as a property to task list. And task list is taking that to-dos array and is mapping that array, and for every element in that array, it will create a task list item. And then that component task list item will get a to-do. So this is the element that I'm iterating, right? Remember when you iterate using map, the first parameter of that function that you use to map is the element of the array that will be iterated. And that value we're passing to the to-do property in the task list item component. In the task list item component, we have something like this. By the way, whatever you put here will be replicated for every task list item element. So right here we have a to-do, but let's say we can create a button at the end of this for the X. So we can use like a trash can, right? Something like that. And I think we can use trash. No. I know there is a React icon, but React icon. Let's see the React icons. For trash can. Okay, so we can use this one. Okay, so just use this, and we need to import it, right? So that means that every to-do will have a trash can at the end. Oh, to-do is not defined. Oh, right. I changed this. See, there's a trash can in a button. I'm not worrying about styling, right? You can do that later. I'm just worrying about making it work. Now, we will go back to that delete later, right? Right now, we know that our task list component gets a list of to-dos, and it will render every element of that task list of to-dos in a task list item. Okay, that thing is clear. Now, let's work on the task input. Okay, now the task input element or the task input component is the one that controls, or the one that has an input and a button to add a new to-do to that list. Okay, so we need to provide several properties to that task input. We need to provide the task, and we need to provide an event that will get fired every time we change that task, right? So we have an on task change. And we can use the set task here directly, because remember, set task is the function that allows us to modify the task. Remember, we have task and set task. So whatever value we call on this on task change on the task input component, it will modify the task. Right? So we have two properties: task, on task change. So we can go to our task input and add those two properties there: task, on task change. Now, events like these functions that we pass, like on task change, right? Usually that's the convention that we use, on something happening. Okay? If we want to add, for example, because this component also has the add button, remember the add button? So we need to also provide an event for this button. So how do we will call that event? On add click. On add click. It doesn't have to be exactly this name. It could be on click or whatever but add task click. Right? Or on add task. But it has to be an event that signals something happened when we click on that button, right? Now, what do we do with the task and the task on change? We need to create an input and a button next to that input to add, right? So these are two elements that we need to write. So the first one is an input, and the second one is a button that says add. Of course, this input is not tied to the state that we have in the previous component yet. We are not using. And if you remember from last class, when you have an input, you need to add two properties to that input: the value and onChange. So what is the value of the input? Task. Oops, no. Task. And what's the onChange? On task change will not work. Let me explain why. It's because onChange on an input is a synthetic event that doesn't actually work the same way this on task change works. because this remember that if we have an event, so if we can do it like this, event on task change event.target.value. That's the only issue, is that it's not actually the new value, is an event. And an event has a target, and that target has the value, right? So we can do this. And now we have an input that is connected to the state in our upper component. We have the task value and we have the on task change. So every time we change every time this input changes, we are calling that event change. And for the button, we can connect the on click to the on add task. And now my button also works. Okay, so in my to-do list, I only missing the on add task, and I will call it handle add task. And this handle, I will just do an alert. Add task. Okay, and that's it. So now in my app, if I click on the add, you see that add task work. And of course, if I write here, that will be connected to the state in my to-do list. There you go. Let's say we have to put in some gas. And that's the value of that state. Okay? Questions about? Okay. Questions. Got a question? No? Okay, so you understand why we're passing handlers, right? On task change, on task add. It's because the task input, component doesn't know how to add the task. It's not his job, right? The task input component doesn't have a way to actually add a task, right? It's leaving that task to whoever is using this component. So in this case, is the to-do list. And the to-do list, as a handler here, that this handler will know how to add the task. Because this handler will have access to the to-dos and the set to-dos and everything, and it will have access to the task, okay? And actually we saw how this thing worked in Monday's class, right? So what is the code that we need to implement to add the new task?
So to-dos, that push. Oh yeah.
You cannot modify the variable from a state. We need to do the spread operator, right? Now, you can do it in 2 steps, right? You can create a new to-do and use a spread operator and then add the task and then set to-dos, right? Oops. I will add one more step in this, or one more instruction. Because remember, what happens here is, when we click on the add, let's say we wrote buy groceries, and you click on the add button, right? That add button is calling this handler, and this handler is creating a new array with all the previous to-dos, with one more to-do, and then it's setting that as the new to-dos. So that new to-do will automatically show at the bottom of the list, right? But if that's all it does, now you have a state where you have a new buy groceries at the end of the list, but you still have buy groceries on the input. You should need to reset that state, right? And how you do that?
Set to-dos. I mean set tasks. And empty string.
Empty string, exactly. So I can set the task again as an empty string, and that will set the state to my to-do will be at the end of the list, and the task input will be empty, right? And that's what I want when I click that button. Now, what if I want the to-do to show on the top instead of at the bottom? What should I change here?
So then first the task and then all the.
Yeah, first the task and then the list of to-dos, the spread of the to-dos. Great. Now, you get the difference? Like if you put task and then all the to-dos, that means that the new task is on the top and then the rest of the to-dos, right? And that's, I think that's what we want. Now, what if I want to avoid that the user hits add when the task is empty? If you don't put any task, I shouldn't be able to add that button.
We could do
We could
a conditional.
do what?
An if condition.
A condition. So let's do a condition here.
So if task equals to an empty string or triple equals to the same type, then
What should I do here?
I mean no, if task is different,
Then I put everything inside, right? Now, this is not incorrect. It's perfect, actually. But you know that you have to be, when you are working in the browser, everything that the user enter is probably garbage, right? So yeah, if they don't enter nothing in the input and you hit enter or you hit the add button, nothing will happen, and that's fine. But what if they put a bunch of spaces and they hit add? You have to protect against that, right? So I would do a little trick here. I would do trim, right? If I trim the task, that means that all the spaces from. So trim is a function in a string. Let me play trim because I think we used it a couple of times, but we never discussed this function before. So if you have an array, a string like this, and you do trim will remove the spaces from the beginning of the string and the end of the string. So this will effectively be hello, right? So that's what trim does. Of course, if you have a string that is all spaces, then you will have an empty string, okay? And that's what we're using here to check if we trim the task and we don't have an empty string, then we can add the task, okay? And let's try it. So what will be another task? Let's say start coding that app. Add, boom, start coding an app. And it shows right there on the top. And then if I hit add now, nothing happens. If I put a bunch of spaces, also nothing happens. Now, if I push a bunch of spaces and then an A, what do you think it will happen?
only an A.
It will add an A to the. Well, actually, it will add a bunch of spaces and an A to the list of tasks, right? It doesn't trim when we add it to the. Right, it's only trimming for the condition, but it's not trimming it here. Now it's doing it. But you get the point. Okay, now it's an A.
Yeah.
Great. Questions?
Yeah, you're recording this question?
Yeah, I'm recording this. It's the only question that you're asking.
No, but
It's 'cause you're
I
going
found my
really
questions were
fast.
not.
Oh, I see. Okay. That's my bad. Sorry about that. I have to slow it down, right? A little bit. No, I mean, I understand. Remember, it's just practice, right? Do it again and again and again. And I will change this project a little bit in a minute. So we still need to do something else in this project. Or I'm missing something here. Functionality here is the delete, right? We need to be able to delete an element of the to-dos list. Now, what component should have that functionality, the delete?
The task list item.
Task list item, the functionality should be here as well, but the task list item should have a way to signal that I'm trying to delete an element on the list, right? So I will call that handler on delete. handle delete. Now this handler, by the way, handlers can take any parameters that you want, right? You can make the handler accept any type of parameters. I will make this handler take the index that you want to delete, right? So alert,
I mean, we
delete.
have a key, right?
Sorry?
We have a key.
You cannot use the key. The key is for React. The key is something that React requires, but you cannot use the key. We will see another way. So we can pass the index, right? I want just to know what index I want to delete. 0 means the first, and n will be whatever n item. And now I'm passing an onDelete property to my task list component, right? Now my task list component should get now an onDelete handler. And it's actually not doing anything with the handler. I'm passing that handler down to delete this. Now, the task list item will have also an onDelete, right? But that onDelete will be a little bit different because when I call this handler, I will call onDelete on the index. And this index, I should get it from the map, from here. The reason I'm doing this is because the task list item onDelete doesn't care because it's only one button here, right? I should be calling onDelete onClick is onDelete. And it's probably a little bit confusing that they both call the same. So let's rename this as onDelete task. Okay? So the task list item has now an onDelete task, and that will be the handler for the button, the trash button, right? So that means that when I click on this button over here, what is that? When I click on this button over here, I will call that onDelete task. Now, in my task list, onDelete task, the name of the handler, let's rename this as onDelete task index. I think now it's clear. Okay, so onDelete task index is the handler that task list requires, and it's a handler that will receive an index, and it will delete that index from the array, right? And now in my task list component, I'm getting that onDelete task index, and I have to do something with it. And what I'm doing is that for every task list item that I'm rendering, I will have to pass an onDelete task, and that onDelete task will basically be an event where I'm calling that onDelete task index with the index of this element. So I know that when I click on the element, that will trigger that onDelete task on that element's index, right? A little bit.
It basically applies an event listener.
Yeah, it's an event listener. All of them are listeners. So because the thing is that the task list item on click is just doing onDelete task. What I'm saying is that the task list item doesn't care or doesn't know that I'm in a list, because I don't care if I'm in a list or not, right? I'm just an index. If I see this element in isolation, what I see is just the name and the button. And when I click the button, that means delete, right? That's it. I don't know what index am I. I could be the 0, I could be the 10. I don't care. I know that I have a button, and when you click that button, I will call the handler. That's it, right? And that's the handler is onDelete task. So that's what the onClick of this button does. When you click this button, onDelete task is called. That's all. But from the task list point of view, when you are rendering every element, you have to pass a different a different function every time. And this function will be for this particular item. I mean, it will be item 0, at 0, at 1, at 3, etc., etc. I will call in this function with a different index every time. So that will be on delete task index. Now, let's see how that works. If I click here, that will be delete, but I don't see the index. Oh, because I didn't. So this will be delete at 0, and the other one should be delete at 1. Right? So now my function needs to delete that element. Now, how do I delete an element from an array?
Filter.
A what?
Filter.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the ways. I mean, it's like kind of. Is that the best way? But one of the best way. Huh?
Remove.
No, because it's an index. Pop remove from the bottom, from the end of the, from the end. On shift remove from the beginning. I need to be able to remove from one of the elements. Splice works, but yeah, splice works, but do splice returns the array or modifies the array?
It modifies the array.
Then it's not good. Remember, we cannot modify the array. We cannot do push. You cannot do pop. We cannot do splice.
Can you replace the array?
Well, you can. Wait, how do people do this? I think filter is the only way, right? Maybe? No, wait. Let's ask ChatGPT.
Filter takes
Filter is the best way. So, create or delete an element of an array in JavaScript by the index. Splice. Oh, I need to say don't change the array. Yeah, don't modify the original array.
So you keep null
Nice.
in that index numbers on you?
Oh, that's a good one. Right? That's not bad. Actually, I like this. Right? I'm getting all the elements from 0 to that index, and then all the elements from that index plus 1 to the end. And I'm adding these two arrays together.
Add them together.
And that will be an array that has all the elements. So, yeah, I like this.
Why?
Because that way you replace the array with a new array.
Yeah, exactly. So we can do this here. Of course, this will be to-dos, and then we can set to-dos with that new array, right? Let's see if it works. Let's add one more task. Code the app. So, delete the middle task. Okay, buy groceries. It's gone. Nice. Code the app. That works.
Can I see the code?
Uh-huh. Now,
Undo button.
that's a good one. So undo, but we can do an undo.
Can you?
Yeah, why not?
I don't know that you can.
Yeah, let's do it. But you understand the delete, right?
Yeah, that was cool.
So delete is just taking an index and removing that element from the array. And by the way, there is another way. Let's ask ChatGPT again, but let's do it with filter. I like the filter version more, because the filter version is just iterating to all the elements and saying when the index equals the index that I want, just don't add it, right? And you will see that it's actually.
Okay with that, with filtering out that one.
Yeah, check the version of index. Is the fastest one. So this is to-dos, filter. Actually, we don't care about element, but we do. So let's call it here J. Like this. Yeah, it's clearer now. Okay, so we know we are passing an index to remove, right? And the filter takes two parameters, element, comma, index, as any other mapping function. Mapping, filter, sum, every, all of those functions have the same syntax, right? So element, comma, index, comma, array. Those are the three parameters. But we need the index. We don't care about the array. We don't care about the element. That's why I put an underscore. Because we don't actually, like if I put element here, you see that element will be shaded because it's saying, okay, you are not using this, right? Because I only care about the index. And if not the index to remove, I will filter that element. That means I'm keeping that element. But if is the element to remove, I'm rejecting that element. This is actually a reject in some other JavaScript implementations when you can do the equality. But we don't have that in all, so we will do filter. Right? Now, because I don't need the element, usually the convention is to use an underscore to signal that that's a parameter that I don't care about, right? I only care about the index. And this is exactly the same. That will work the same. Right? It's another way to delete elements from an array. Okay? Cool. Now, let's do undo. I really think we can do undo. Okay, so what is an undo? Think about it.
You gotta go back to the original state of the array.
Okay, so what you have basically are versions of to-dos. So what you need is to store all the to-dos from every iteration. Every time you modify the to-dos, you want to store that, right? So you know that when you store that, you can go back to that previous version. Make sense? Cool. So how do we copy an array? It should be a way to clone an array or something like that. Because you want to copy a version of that array. How do we copy an array? Can you check what is the function in JavaScript to clone an array? Or copy an array?
The spread operator?
Actually, yeah. that's the way. That's true.
What?
The spread operator is actually copying an array. That's a good one, yeah. Okay, so what is this? What is the state that I need to add here? Let's call it versions, or to-do versions. Set to-dos versions. By the way, we don't need to do this. I'm just adding this because it's like a challenge now. So use state. What will be the first state?
The actual to-do.
An empty array. Because the actual to-do is an empty array, so we can store an empty array. Remember, these versions it's a list of all the arrays that we had before.
So it's an array of
It's an array of arrays, yes. So it starts empty, and that's the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. So let's put it here.
So every time you delete
Every time you modify the array, you need to take the new array and store that version. Okay? Now, I will add, and I think this is a good way to introduce the effect hook. Right? Remember the use effect hook? Actually, you don't remember, we didn't learn it. But let's learn about the use effect hook. And the reason I'm trying to avoid using use effect is because it's very dangerous and it's actually discouraged. It's not impossible to remove completely because some apps will actually require. And I think this is one of the cases that you might use it. So what does the useFed do? useFed is a hook that allows to run code after the component gets rendered, right? So that means that every time the component re-renders, we can call that function, right? That's what the useFed is doing. And it's usually tied to some data. So useFed has two parameters. One is the actual function, the fed, right? So this function here, that's what we call the fed. Let me make the parameters a little bit clearer. So one parameter and second parameter. Okay? The first parameter is a function executed every time the component renders. And actually, it's not technically every time the component renders, it's every time the dependencies change after render. So this answers two questions. Is when this function gets executed after the component gets rendered, and when it's executed and when it's not executed, when these dependencies, the second parameter is the dependencies array, that's the name of that array, is whenever the data inside that array changes, this effect gets executed again, right? Now, if you have an empty array, that means that this effect will only be executed once, right? And we can test it in our component, right? Let's add an effect, use effect, and by the way, you need to import useFed. You have to import it in React, right? The same way you are importing state, useState, you need to import useFed. Now, what we're going to do is do an alert. First time render. And the dependency array will be an empty array. So an empty array means only call this one time after the component loads on the page, right? And you will see that that's what it shows. No, it's the new version of React calls it twice actually in dev mode. That's a huge thing. It's like a huge debate about it. But yeah, it renders twice in dev mode. But if I run this in production mode, it will only run once, right?
Why?
No, that's me. That's the meta guys. Yeah, it runs. I mean, I can show it like. There is a way to run it in production. You can do npm run build and then npm run start, and you will see that's the production version. And I'm pretty sure that it will do that. Npm run start. Oops.
There's no script.
Okay. I think I cannot run in production here. Okay. Well, that's a problem in this version of React. But anyway, this will call that effect. It should be only once, but it's doing it twice in dev mode. Now, if I want to run this effect only when some data changes, I need to put that data here. And the data that I want to be tracking is to-dos. So every time to-dos change, I want to see that it changed, right? So what I'm going to add is to-dos here. And basically, every time to-dos change, I will console log to-dos. Just that. So that means that every time we add something to the to-do list, or we delete something from the to-do list, because the to-do list is changing, I will see that in the console log, right? So let's open the console. And you see that right now we have, there you go, the two effects that we call. But right now, if we say code an app, and we hit add, we got that. So every time the to-do changes, I got the print the console log. And if I delete something, I got in the console log. So every time to-dos is modified, that function is executed. That's what the effect is doing, right? And if I add something again, buy water. So as you can see, every time to-dos changes, my effect gets executed because the effect is listening to the to-dos. Every time to-dos changes, I get there. So you see where I'm going here is that now I can come here and say, okay, set to-dos versions as all the previous to-dos versions and the new to-dos. And a copy of the new to-dos, right? So to-dos versions will be an array of all the version of to-dos. If you delete, Steve, right? If you delete or do anything, it will be there. Now, let's add a button here to go back. So button, on, click. Let's do handle back. And this will be back button or undo. And handle back is a function that will basically take the last element of that to-dos version, right? Actually, we can, yeah, it will take the last element of the to-dos version. How do we get the last element?
Index.
Okay, so to-dos version, the len -1. Okay, perfect. So we have the last. Now we have to, we had the last, we had to set the to-dos versions. Actually, when we remove, we need to remove it, right? Oh, nice. No. Let's do new versions. Let's do a copy. That will be better. To-dos versions, right? And we say, give me the last. How do we get the last? Using pop. So new version dot pop. And we have the last, because remember, pops returns the last element. So now we can say, okay, to-dos versions will be new version, because it doesn't have the last element. So I'm removing, and I set in the to-dos to do to that last, and that's my back button. Let's see it. What is the okay code and app? Add. If I do undo, nothing happened.
Could you do delete, Sancho? Is it something you had to remove and then it sets it?
Wait, this might be some error in the console. Oh, actually, there's no error in the console.
Did you import the functions again?
Yeah. I mean, I don't need to import anything. Wait. Let's go back. Something wrong here. Oh, okay. Let's see the state. So let's see what's the state in my to-do list. Okay, so yeah, so everything is there. I think and if I add something, code this. You see that now state has work groceries, walk dog, code this, walk dog.
But undo should take you back to the walk dog.
Oh, right. No.
Because then you have to add it to the.
Yeah. I have to actually.
This item.
Yeah. It's doing something, but it's not doing what I think it's doing. The array. In the array, we have code this, walk dog. I don't have to I don't have to, I had to remove the last and then see what's the last and use that as the new to-dos. That's what I actually have to do, right? So the implementation is incorrect. I need to remove and then take the last element. So that would be new version, add new version, the len -1. And that's the undo. Okay, so let's see it. Code and app. Add, and let's do by water. Add, and let's remove walk dock, right? Now, if I do undo, it will put back on add dock. And then if I do undo, we'll remove by water. And actually, it's not doing anything. Oh, interesting.
What?
It's a mess. My implementation is a real mess. Let's go back. Okay, so wait, if I add something here, let's do by water. Okay, and I do undo now. Oh, right. No, it's because the effect is messing with the. You see that why effects are so dangerous? It's like because I'm changing to-dos, the effect is also checking that and say, oh, add that to the task list. It's a mess. It's a definitely a mess. Yeah. No. I mean, we can still do it. No, don't do that. No. I mean, this is a quick fix, but anyway. Yeah. That was the fix. Sorry. But again, the effect. That's why effects are so dangerous. It's because you don't see the implication of changing state, because when you change state, effect gets triggered. And lucky for us, that state is not actually modifying. That effect is not actually modifying the to-dos, right? Because if this effect, check this effect, if this effect modifies the to-dos, then that's an infinite thing, right? Because we modified the to-do, we call the effect again, and we call the effect again, and we call the effect again, right? Now I think it should be working. By water. Add, and then let's add one more. Walk. Okay, put gas. And then remove walk dock, right? Notice that if I do this, now it's working, right? Because I'm taking the effect into account. But check this out. If I mean, we know how it works now. But I would add an effect that will basically modify the to-dos. And I will just add all the previous to-dos and one more. Okay? And this will run every time the to-dos is changed. My app now is already broken.
Yeah.
Because it's changing the to-dos. The effect is running again because the to-dos was changed, and it's running again, and in a second, you see the council, right? It's infinite. And actually, you think it's, well, lucky enough, it's like, it closes. Sometimes it's a bigger problem, right? Because sometimes it's just checking, like for example, you have an effect that is pulling something from a backend. You're making a million requests you see the amount of requests, you're making all those requests, right? So you have to be careful with effects. In this case, this effect is not modifying anything that gets rendered, we're just storing data, right? That's okay. But yeah, that's the on the okay here.